if you're creating your own system, I think the one thing that I learned the most is it's not the consistency that you should expect. It's you should expect yourself to be inconsistent. But when you notice it, remind yourself that you're building the strength of persistence. And so when you fall off the wagon, be thankful you can get back on, right? And then the other thing I learned a couple of years ago was maybe learn to forgive yourself.
Welcome to Season 2 of ADHD Difference. I'm your host, Julie Legg, ADHD advocate, author of The Missing Piece, A Woman's Guide to Understanding, Diagnosing and Living with ADHD, and an unapologetic doer of many things. This season, we're turning up the volume with a global lineup of brilliant guests, bringing their lived experiences, insights, research, strategies, and resources. And of course, along with a healthy dose of humour and humility. Whether you're neurodivergent yourself or just curious, there's something here for every curious brain. Let's dive in. Today, I'm joined by Dominic Carubba, a former commissioned US Army officer and longtime sales leader who was diagnosed with ADHD later in life. After decades of high performance, his diagnosis helped him understand the invisible friction underneath the success, the overcomplication, the burnout, and the subtle loss of self-trust. Now he helps entrepreneurs with ADHD restore forward motion by simplifying, clarifying, and building systems that actually fit how their brains work. Today's conversation is about that quiet erosion of self-trust and how overcomplication, especially for ADHD brains, can slowly chip away at confidence, even when life looks successful from the outside. It's about ADHD, self-trust, and why sometimes the bravest move isn't doing more, it's doing less, better. Welcome to the show, Dominic.
Hey, Julie, good to see you.
Good to see you too. Right, you were diagnosed with ADHD later in life, as myself.
Yep.
But for you, it was after years of high performance in sales and leadership. So looking back, where do you now see overcomplication showing up in your life before diagnosis?
I remember the very first time I was in elementary school. I think it was first grade. And it was a Catholic school. Of course, everything had to be exactly right. And I remember they had us writing a postcard. And I remember writing my postcard, like I filled out all the letters in the beginning, and then I needed more room. So I started writing all around the edges. I don't know why it seemed like a good solution, right? And I don't know why I remember that, but I was 6 or 7 when it happened. I have I don't know. Here's the thing. It showed, I didn't notice it showing up because remember, that was 40, 50 years ago, right? So, I just got spanked a lot. I got, disciplined a lot. I always had failed conduct. It wasn't complication as far as I could tell, because I had the energy to keep up with all of the stuff. It was a lot easier to keep up with all the things that were going on. And I had a very turmoil upbringing, like high turmoil. My parents got divorced twice. We go into the whole history of it, but it's just like there's a lot of things going on. It all seemed kind of normal, It all fit, and I had a lot of energy to keep up with it. I'm still a pretty high energy person, but after diagnosis and as I get older and as life changes, what I see now is there's less runway that I have to correct my mistakes, and that's when it became more and more important to like adjust that complication. It didn't occur to me, but it also didn't go with my diagnosis. And I got diagnosed, and then a couple of years later is when I really here's what I took on. I took on this idea that I wanted to be, I was tired of people not thinking I was reliable. and I wanted to be reliable. Like I thought, look, I'm reliable. Why does everybody think I'm not reliable? So I engaged in this effort to learn what it was that was keeping me from being unreliable. Still never connected the dots with ADHD. Remember, I got diagnosed in '94. I was one of the first diagnoses after it came out in the book, but there was no help for it. Right? I was just on my own, like go do this, and I started taking medication, and I didn't because I did a Tony Robbins seminar. I was like, I could beat my chest, do this. That lasted a couple of years, till I went back to school, and I realized that the medication actually did make a difference. So it was a lot of things I discovered, but I still didn't start getting treatment literally till about 2 years ago.
Mm.
I'd learned a lot, seen a lot, noticed that it become really popular, lots of books, but didn't realize it. Made a lot of, they'd covered a lot of ground in the last 30 years since I got diagnosed,
Definitely. And I think being diagnosed with it and then there being no follow up, just relying on medication but no tools or strategies or mentors,
Yeah.
it's almost like a wasted diagnosis in a way. Um, Here it is.
Absolutely.
Here's your ticket. It's a ticket to nowhere particularly now. So yeah,
Correct.
so much has changed in the last 30 years. It's been glorious. Yeah.
I had a friend who had an eating disorder. And the biggest challenge with like an eating disorder is that you still have to eat. And the biggest challenge, like, because you could stop hanging out with people that do drugs, or you could stop hanging out in places that serve alcohol if that's your addiction of choice, right? But you got to eat. Well, the symptoms of ADHD for me are the same symptoms everybody else has, just not to the same degree. And I think that's
Mm.
what the world, they hear all this ADD stuff now because there's lots of influencers out there doing their messaging and people are interested. We live in an ADHD world. We live in an ADD world, right? We're constantly bombarded with distractions. And so symptomatically, it's getting hard to tell who does and who doesn't have it?
No, you're right. I mean, purely by the clinical diagnosis, when all of those questions, you're right. Are you distracted? Do you feel restlessness? All of these things. 100% of the population could, of course, say, yes, I do. Yes, I do
Sure.
from time to time. But it's the often or very often that sets us apart, isn't it? From a neurotypical versus ADHD, really. I'd love to talk to you, Dominic, about your career and how you were feeling, particularly on the surface. You were succeeding, right? But
Yeah.
internally, what was actually happening for you?
It's really funny because I thought about this, right? And I looked at the things I achieved early on in life. Like I achieved a lot of stuff really early on. But then I had, and here's the thing, a lot of it looked like circumstances. But as I look back and I can trace back, right? Like chronic urgency, all the mental noise. I didn't even know what anxiety was until a couple of years ago. I just thought that's how everybody lived with the voices in their head. Externally I was confident, but internally I was always compensating. And it was for me the drop. I was the youngest of three boys. And so survival was really my main goal most of the time, right? My brothers are 3 and 4 years older than me. And I was a toy to them, I think. But it's just uh, it feeling like I was always going to get found out. I always felt like a criminal in some ways, right? I always felt like it was what I had done wasn't enough, wasn't good enough. No matter how good I did, it 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 was just always a means of compensating and never the experience of accomplishment or satisfaction in all those ways because I was always thinking about all the other things I didn't do, right? And
Mm.
so and worrying about people finding out. And so yeah, I think internally that never ending feeling of I have to do more, that I have to make up for all the things I didn't do, over all that stuff. It's just exhausting.
Yeah,
You know?
in today's language, we've now learnt a phrase for that, and that's imposter syndrome
Yeah.
for the very high achievers who still doubt themselves. I've somehow managed to get to the top through luck, or oh no, someone's going to find out that I'm really not as brilliant as people tell me that I am.
Sure.
It's very, yeah, very, very interesting. It does hit a lot of us for sure. On overcomplication, quietly eroding self trust.
Mm.
How does repeatedly overbuilding or overthinking decisions chip away at someone's confidence over time?
I have built a lot of evidence from all the things I abandoned that proves I can't be trusted to finish things. And it took me a long time to to accept that part of myself, that some things would come in and be around and I'd give them a lot of attention for a little while, and then I'd let it go and I move on to another interest. Right? It's probably why I stayed single till I was for nearly 5 decades. Um, Officially, I got married when I was 51. Um, but it was a cycle of feeling behind and trying to catch up. So I'd give a lot of effort and attention to something instead of feeling like it was okay to be where I was at and just build from there. So I would kind of rush in, do a whole lot, and then, you know, it wouldn't turn out the way I wanted it to. So I would just, something else would catch my attention. And again, like I said earlier, that was okay. It was okay. I could justify it much easier when I was younger because I could see a much longer runway to life than until I was about 30, I was still immortal, right? So I was going to live forever anyway. So what's the difference? Now I've woken up some mornings. I don't feel so immortal. My back will tell me different in the morning. So, um, but I would build evidence to not trust myself because of the conversation I was having about what all that meant. And so that's the cycle that led up to the lack of self-trust. And that's actually the topic that had me start finding treatment. I heard a podcast about self-trust. I was like, what is this? And it was a podcast on ADHD. It was about self-trust. A friend of mine with ADHD, we had talked about it, said, hey, you should listen to this. This is great. And that woke me up to a lot of, I'm trusting the wrong part of myself.
Mm,
There's a part of myself
mm,
I can trust, but there's a part that I can always look for evidence of things I can't trust. So you can always find evidence for the thing you don't want, or you don't like, or you don't love about yourself, others, anything. You can always find evidence for anything you want. That's the beauty of being human. Um, and I knew all this stuff. I trained all this stuff. I am an expert at all of this mental mind stuff, but I wasn't using it. I couldn't see it for myself, you know?
mm. Really interesting. I hear a lot, and I experience it myself too. This standard narrative, or our self narrative, our story, concentrating on the things that we didn't achieve, the evidence that we are bad at this and we shouldn't be trusted because we're never going to be reliable because of all these reasons. At a flick of a switch, you can also look at all the evidence that you have been reliable, that you have showed up. That,
Yeah.
every single day of your life, you've showed up for something. Um, so, yeah, it's very, very interesting. But it does take some digging and some work to switch that mindset over. Interesting, as you said, you're on top of the whole thing for others, probably, but for yourself, isn't it? Self work takes work, doesn't it? It's tricksome.
Uh, it does create this sense of, we talk about reinforcing the imposter syndrome too, right? I mean, I've had people come back to me and tell me the things that I don't see myself as doing really well. Come back and thank me for teaching them how to do the thing that they're now doing really much better than me in my world. I'm like, well, how did that work?
Why do you think so many capable ADHD adults default to adding more systems and more tools and more layers to help themselves instead of simplifying?
I think hope is dope in our minds. And we just hope that this one new thing will be the thing that was missing. I remember 3 years ago, toward the end of the year, I was like, okay, dude, let's just write down let's just focus this year, like, coming toward the end of the year, like doing my little review. Let's write down everything that's important. And then I have a big whiteboard on my office over there. You can't see it. I got it down to 16 things. I was like trying to work on one, but I got it down to 16. And now I'm kind of down to three. Like, hey, now I can look at that and say, well, that's about as one as I can get. Like for me, I think some of it is overcomplication is sometimes avoidance. I think that, there's always, look, we're always either seeking pleasure or avoiding pain, but not from the things that causes pleasure or causes pain, but rather the things we think, how we associate pain or pleasure to things. And complexity feels like I'm doing something, like I'm getting my motor's running. I'm really working, like I'm building I got a sweat going, right? And because of the things that I'm doing, it's especially when they disappear into my screens, right? I'm not out doing yard work, where I can see the results of it. And I'm doing something that requires me thinking about it again the next day. Like when I used to bartend was one of the greatest jobs I ever had. But, you were in and you were immersed and then you were done and then life came on and you just did it over again, right? I didn't see a bright future for myself as a 65-year-old bartender one day. Like I didn't see that being my future. So, but simplicity, it just seems boring sometimes too. It gets boring. And I think that's part of the challenge with the ADHD brain. Sometimes it also feels like a defeat to simplify. Like I had to give up, like almost like I'm giving up on something again, And so there's all that. And then I got that big pile of unfinished things. And I go, oh, I'm going to put another thing in the pile when it's exactly what I need to do sometimes is just put some more shit in the pile and go, that's the pile of shit. That's what it's called that for, right? That's why it's that. It's not the pile of gold. It's the pile of stuff you discovered you don't want. And if you do want it, go get it and bring it back.
And there are so many projects and hobbies always in our minds and on our whiteboards or wherever we put them, or just in our heads that we want to do and achieve. It's very difficult to prioritize some of those, whether it's we're doing it for joy or for money or whatever it may be, trying to work out what's the best one. Yes, it can be tricksome. Dominic, there's something particularly painful about being outwardly competent, but not feeling it internally.
Mm.
So, if overcomplication breaks self trust, in your opinion, what actually rebuilds it?
It's a great question. What rebuilds self-trust is visible wins help. If you can create wins, I'll occasionally put check boxes on my whiteboard and check them off and feel, voila. Building your relationship to your word and making commitments that I endeavor to keep, right? I mean, that's when that reliability thought came up. I did a study on myself to find out, was I reliable or not? Like I did a study for 30 days. I measured, was I on time for every appointment in my calendar over 30 days? And I was about 55% on time. Now my standard was, if my appointment was at 12 o'clock, like I was late for this call, so by that standard, the standard was if it's supposed to be somewhere at 12 o'clock, ready to go, and it was 12 o'clock in 1 second when I showed up, I was late. I had a very strict standard. So then the next 30 days, I looked at my numbers. I said, what can I do to improve? I tried something different. I tried a practice of looking at my calendar in the morning and maybe looking at it at night. And then my numbers went up to about 70%, in the 70s. And I'm like, that's interesting. So then I had 2 months worth of data that I could now look back on and go, I wonder what it is. And then I started to notice there was a pattern that developed after 60 days. There were some agreements I was in that 6 days, 100% reliable. I was early. I could tell I was 100%. And the others, meh, who knows, ruining my averages, right? Here's what it was. All the shit that I really wanted to do, or if there was a serious, like I was in a men's group where there was a serious consequence for being late, like what was important and urgent in my mind, and I wanted to do it. If I was a yes, if I was a yeah, I was a clear yes. What I discovered was I was a yes person. I was saying yes to things I really meant no to. And so in that area, that hit up all kind of notes of fear and all this other stuff. But again, I was in a men's group, so I had to man up, right? And I learned to say no a lot more often. And so my percentages went up.
When someone's feeling stuck or a bit scattered, where do you actually start? Whether it's a mindset or a structure or I don't know, where do you start?
It's great because I've been practicing this since 2010. And it starts with pick one thing that you're going to do for a period of time, like 30 days, 40 days, 60 days, 90 days, whatever that is. And I've done it different time durations. They all create value if you're honest about what you're doing and you just pick one thing. Read 15 minutes a day, and you got to get it in by midnight. And if you have somebody you can report that to by midnight, that just boosts it it makes it off the charts. That's how you start when you're stuck. You pick the smallest thing and build on it so that you can have a series of wins over and over and over again. And that's how you have to, because friction, we go into the physics of it, but like friction is, right? And it takes something to get over friction. That's how cars use, and like all this, it takes power to overcome friction. So lower the friction. Doesn't take as much power. So you can get started even with a low battery. So all those things. So lower the bar to create motion, and build on the wins consciously. And when you fall off the wagon, be thankful you've created that little wagon to get back on.
Love that. Love that. And talking about strategies and approaches, you help people design systems that actually fit how their brains work. So, what
Yes.
makes a system trustworthy for an ADHD mind?
I got to tell you, when I took my first psychology class way back when, the teacher said that when you go to a convention of speech therapists, over half the people there usually have a speech problem. I guess the same is true for psychologists, right? We got a problem, so we go into it. Maybe there, right? So I'm in that business of doing this for lots of other people, right? And it's actually counterproductive for me creating my own system because I jump into different systems all the time. But if you're creating your own system, I think the one thing that I learned the most is it's not the consistency that you should expect. You should expect yourself to be inconsistent. But when you notice it, remind yourself that you're building the strength of persistence. And so when you fall off the wagon, be thankful you can get back on, right? I learned that from David Allen, wrote a book called Getting Things Done because I studied productivity because I had to. And then the other thing I learned a couple of years ago was maybe learn to forgive yourself. Not let yourself off the hook, but forgive yourself for being yourself and get back in, just start back with the next thing there is to do. But it should be something, simple to start. And like I teach complex systems that work, like CRMs and business and sales and all that, which I'm really good at putting all that together. But for us with ADHD, if it works, use it. If it doesn't, let it go. And if you just happen to forget that it works, then be thankful you remembered and just start using it again. Give yourself a little grace.
Thank you. With the fight or flight, there's also a freeze. And I think
Sure.
if we don't forgive ourselves and we're stuck in that freeze moment because we don't trust ourselves, hence the self-trust thing. Um, and we become procrastinators because we don't want to make a decision because we don't trust ourselves. And we no longer take risks that we're actually really good at, even positive, healthy risks, because we're even too scared of our own shadows. So, yeah, I agree that forgiveness is really a starting block, isn't it, from changing things up. In your current work, and you're talking about CRMs and if I had that right, and the rest.
Yeah.
What's most exciting for you right now in your work?
So what I do for a living, apologize. I'm writing a book and it's called Unfuck Your Sales CRM because most times they're fucked. And they're fucked not because of the technology, but the people and the way they use it and the way they think about it is mostly stuck, right? So I can apply that to this. So what excites me now is I had one of my clients call me up and say, you know, after we, I spent 3.5 hours trying to figure this thing out. I called you, you were available, and in 7 minutes, you solved it. This technical thing that I knew about. And he says, every time I call you, I just feel this sense of relief. I just like, I could call like, so, and that helping people achieve that little bit of, ah, okay, that's not as big. It's not as bad. It's not big of a bummer that I thought it was. We can move through it. And I started a little group, coaching group on my own because I'd been putting that off for 25 years. And I'm just always amazed when people show up every Monday and Friday. I'm like, awesome. Somebody showed. This is great. And I'm finding I trust myself by just hosting the call and being, hey, they're not, who didn't show? Well, I didn't, whatever. So I'm finding it. I'm learning and doing that. But I really do. And have found a real excitement in helping people go from what I call the drift to the gift. That's what my little website says, right? Well, you disorganized, rushed, frustrated, inconsistent, tired, all those things we feel when we go down that tunnel of beating ourselves down to where you can get grounded, clear on your intention, focused, if not for long, but a little while, right? And trusting yourself. That's the gift. And I'm really excited about watching and helping people in some of the conversations. And it turns out the less that I do, the less that I say, the more they discover on their own and the faster they're getting results now. So I've got some coaching and that's the most thing I'm talking about. Oh, I get to shut up. That's great. I'll talk on podcasts now instead of talking in the group, and I'm letting them do the work and they because they know what to do. They just need somebody who loves them and cares them and knows what they're going through.
So many ADHDers are also really good at problem solving, solving other people's problems and other business issues. But to turn that inwardly, and I can see how it does work with you as the coach. You don't necessarily have to tell them what to do, but to put them in a group environment where together they can piece things in and solve it together is wonderful.
Go ahead.
So, a final question for you, Dominic, and that's for someone who is listening who feels stuck in cycles of overthinking or rebuilding and doubting themselves. What would you most want them to understand about self trust and ADHD?
You are not broken. You're likely compensating, which is not necessary. There is an action for you to take, and it's just closer to you than you're thinking about it instead of being present and looking at what's right here, right now, bringing your attention to this moment. And, if you feel stuck in overthinking and trying to rebuild, which I do a lot, it's not a character flaw, it's a design flaw. And the great thing about design is you can change the design. You are the designer. And you're going to rebuild again anyway, right? You're going to go through it again anyway. So why not redesign it in a way that works for you? First, and see if that helps. And you know what? I come to this conclusion that it may never go away. Like this thing, I think the biggest problem with ADHD is that we think that there is a solution. Oh yeah, if I take this medicine, if I do this thing or listen to this, it's going to all go away. No, no, no. You're just going to get better at getting back. So you see it. My best friend gave that to me. I have friends that go, "Hey man, you're kind of duplicating things." I'm like, So it's always good to like train the people around. You already trained them in a lot of ways. Why not train them to help you notice what you can't see while you're in it? And that's when my friends came up with this idea of you're duplicating it. I'm like, whoa, okay. So that gives me permission to breathe. It gives me permission to get present. It gives me permission to be aware that what I think is happening may not be happening. I could get here and see if I could think of something else.
It's marvelous. Oh, thank you so much, Dominic. Look, I really appreciate your time on the show today. And I wish you all the very best with your very exciting business things. And I really appreciate your insights on self trust and overcomplication. It's been marvelous.
It's a journey, and I'm glad to be on it. And I'm glad to meet people like you that are in the conversation, that are spreading the word, that are getting, it's, I don't know if I let myself feel shame my whole life, but I definitely know that as I would get deep into the focus of the things that weren't supporting my energy and positive and outlook and all those things that I could do, that there was a lot of shame, grief, regret, all those things that happened, right? And I think having conversations like this is going to allow people to know that, maybe there's a purpose in it. Maybe there's a lesson in it. Maybe there's something that you could learn, share with other people, and maybe you'll save somebody from making a really bad decision. So thank you for that.